Yeah. Call meeting to order. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded on video as well as audio. And we will go next to the roll call. Please, Dave.
Mark Nonig.
Here.
Carl England.
Here.
Jack Prothero.
Here.
Terry Cogy.
Here.
John Satchery.
Here.
Diane Fladmo.
Here.
Maggie Peterson.
Here.
Jeff Greenfield.
Here.
Jim Edwards.
Here.
Senator Sales. And Representative Hamilton.
Here. Okay. Now we go to the portion of the meeting where public comment for matters that are within the board's jurisdiction but are not on the agenda. So before making your comments, please be sure that you've signed in and that your organization's name is next to yours on the sign-in sheet. Please be aware that, as I understand, we have some people here to comment today. Please be aware that we won't be taking any action on any of the matters that you may be speaking about. Of course, we would professional meeting type conduct is required by all parties at all times. I do reserve the right to limit the testimony in order for us to get through the matters on our agenda. I'm thinking that, how many people, would you raise your hands, how many people intend to speak? 3?
And we will need translation.
Sorry, sir, 4? Okay. I will, let's try to get everybody done in 15 minutes. If you wish to come forward one at a time, that's fine. If you wish to come forward as a group, that's fine. However you wish to do it. So with that, please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Here? All right. So my name is Laurel Fish. I work for Unite Here, local 2 in San Francisco, and I'm here to translate. So Isabel's going to speak in Spanish, and then I'll translate. So it is going to take a little bit longer, but we'll try and keep our comments brief.
Hola.
Hola.
Mi nombre es Isabel Ponce. Trabajo en housekeeping en Pullman Hotel de California. Ustedes son parte de dueños del hotel a través de su inversión de CBRE, Fondo 7. Yo pedí tiempo de mi trabajo y vine aquí de California porque ustedes necesitan saber lo que está pasando en mi hotel.
Hello, my name is Isabel Ponce. I work at the Pullman Hotel as a housekeeper, and I work at the Pullman Hotel in California as a housekeeper. You all are part owners of my hotel through your investment in CBRE Fund 7. I asked for time off from work today and came here from California because you need to know what's going on in my hotel.
Yo vine a los Estados Unidos como refugiada de El Salvador hace 20 años y he estado trabajando en el hotel legalmente desde aquel entonces. Limpiar cuarto es trabajo que nadie más quiere hacer.
I came to the United States as a refugee from El Salvador 20 years ago, and I've been working legally in the hotel ever since. Cleaning rooms is the job that no one else wants to do.
A veces estoy tan cansada cuando llego a mi casa que ni puedo levantarme para freír un huevo. Mi nieta que tiene 11 años me hace la comida y me lo lleva a la cama.
Sometimes I'm so tired and exhausted when I get home from work that I can't even get up to fry an egg. My 11-year-old granddaughter has to make food and bring it to me in bed.
Pero al hotel no le interesa, yo ni mis compañeras de trabajo. El hotel subió el costo de la aseguranza médica, tanto que muchos de nosotros no podemos pagar para ir al doctor. A una de mis compañeras la diagnosticaron con cáncer de tiroides, pero no fue al doctor por más de un año porque no podía pagar los biles.
But the hotel doesn't seem to care about me or my coworkers. The hotel raised the cost of health insurance so much that many of us can't afford to go to the doctor. One of my coworkers, for example, was diagnosed with thyroid cancer and didn't go to the doctor for more than a year because she knew she couldn't pay for it.
Cuando nosotros defendemos, pedimos más paz laboral al hotel, respondió con amenaza e intimidación. Tuvimos que meter demandas de robo de salario con la Comisión Laboral y todavía estamos esperando que nos paguen correctamente.
When we stood up for ourselves and asked for labor peace, the hotel responded with threats and intimidation. We had to file wage theft claims for wage theft with the Labor Commission, and we're still waiting to be paid correctly.
Ahora, en vez de resolver el disputo, CBRE está intentando lavarse las manos de nosotros. Pusieron el hotel en venta. Si un nuevo dueño compra el hotel y quiere despedirnos a todos, nosotros lo pueden hacer.
So now, instead of resolving the dispute, CBRE, the hotel owner, is trying to wash their hands of us. They put the hotel up for sale, which means that if a new owner comes in and wants to buy the hotel and fire us all, they can do that.
Quiero que CBRE y ustedes como inversionistas sepan que no nos vamos a ir sin luchar. Tenemos meses de estar protestando frente al hotel, a veces a las 7 a.m. y ahora trabajadores de la otra propiedad de CBRE, el Irvine Marriott, está hablando públicamente de abusos que han sufrido en su hotel, incluso acoso sexual.
But I've told CBRE, and I want you as investors to know, that we aren't going away without a fight. We've been protesting and picketing in front of the hotel for months, sometimes as early as 7 in the morning. And now, at the same time, workers from the other property owned by CBRE, the Irvine Marriott Hotel, are speaking out publicly about abuses that they've suffered at the hotel, including stories of sexual harassment.
Estos disputos laborales no son buenos para nadie. Es malo para nosotros como trabajadores y también es malo para ustedes como inversionistas. Estoy aquí para pedir que paren la venta de Pullman Hotel para que se resuelva el disputo laboral.
These labor disputes aren't good for anybody. They're bad for us as workers, and they're bad for you as investors. I'm here to ask that you ask CBRE to stop the sale of the hotel until the labor dispute is resolved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias. And thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir. Hi.
My name is Tim McWilliams. I'm an old retired Montana teacher who greatly appreciates what you do because I'm living off your investments at the moment. I worked in public schools in Knoxville, Montana for 18 years. Got to know Carl as a result there, and I worked here in Bozeman. Then I also worked as the headmaster of Headwaters Academy in Bozeman for 10 years and retired a few years ago. I'm here to speak on behalf of United First. I'm here to support the Pullman Hotel workers. I think it's wrong for my retirement funding should come partially at the expense of the hardworking people at the Pullman Hotel. These people, as we all know, work really hard at jobs that most people won't take. They work hard in less than great working conditions to make the lives of those who are far wealthier comfortable. They deserve to make a decent living with reasonable working conditions. As a longtime educator, I saw how difficult it was for students to make progress and have emotional well-being when their parents have low-paying jobs, inconsistent schedules, and a general lack of security in their lives. I understand that there has been an unresolved labor dispute for 18 months and that the Pullman Hotel is now for sale. These workers must have a management that comes to the table to resolve the dispute before selling the hotel. If not, the management puts obviously the workers' employment security and their personal lives at risk. I guess I'd ask you guys to please pressure the CBRE to halt the sale of the Pullman Hotel. until the hotel's management comes to the table and comes to a reasonable resolution with these folks. And I want you to know that I'm here not representing any particular organization in Montana, but I'm here as an individual just because I heard about this. I know you're invested down there, and I thought it would be helpful, hopefully, if I came to talk to you. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Hi, good morning. My name is Roxana Aslin with Unite Here Local 11. As you've just heard from Isabel Ponce, Pullman workers have been fighting for a fair process to decide on unionization, free from management interference and intimidation for over a year. I'd like to thank Isabel for sharing her story, as hard as it is to hear. And I'd like to thank Tim for supporting her and other workers from Pullman and the Irvine Marriott. Unfortunately, instead of improving, the situation at the two hotels has worsened. CBRE recently announced it has put the Pullman up for sale without resolving the labor dispute with its operator, HEI, putting employees' jobs at risk. We are asking the Montana Board of Investments to call on CBRE to halt the sale of the Pullman until the labor dispute has been resolved. I have provided the board a history of the labor dispute at the Pullman and a fact sheet outlining allegations of sexual harassment and forced arbitration at CBRE Group. And like Isabel mentioned, we now know the Pullman is not a special case. Indeed, workers at the Irvine Marriott have experienced injustices as well. On November 7th, courageous women shared stories of sexual harassment and abuse for the first time. We want to make very clear that we will not tolerate any retaliation against Irvine Marriott workers or Pullman workers. Please direct CBRE to tell HEI and Marriott not to fire, discipline, or otherwise retaliate against these brave workers. As you know, none of this is happening in a vacuum. The Irvine Marriott workers support their sisters and brothers at the Pullman who have been fighting for labor peace from CBRE's operator HEI for more than a year. Separately, thousands of Marriott workers are on strike across the country. The Pullman Hotel and Irvine Marriott Hotel are both owned by CBRE through Strategic Partners Fund 7. Together, these two hotels account for more than 20% of the value of Fund 7. Both of these hotels are currently being marketed for sale. So to be very clear, we believe that the common denominator at the Pullman San Francisco Bay and the Irvine Marriott is CBRE's unwillingness to hold their operators to the standard that the Montana Board of Investments expects. Indeed, CBRE seems like an obstacle to the board's efforts to mitigate risk throughout its portfolio. There is only one way to overcome this problem: calling on CBRE to sign a labor peace agreement that applies to those investments to which the Montana Board of Investments is exposed. And to reiterate, both the Irvine Marriott and Pullman are currently being marketed for sale. As we've highlighted in the labor peace report I provided to staff, we believe that it is not in the interest of limited partners to sell the Pullman when conditions like these prevail. We believe the same principle applies to the Irvine Marriott. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further people who want to comment, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the August 21, 22 minutes.
Thank you.
Yes, you certainly may be excused. We have a insertion.
Yes,
Right,
an
thank you.
insertion from.
Does
yes.
everyone have a copy of the insertion? Can we, do we game one or do we want?
Yeah, it's basically Ethan's elaboration on the JLL.
So, I had noticed that Ethan gave a pretty good explanation, I thought, very good explanation of our treatment of the investment that was at issue with the public comments we had. And just wanted to make sure we had that in the record. So that's the reason for the additional insertion. So any further discussion, or may I have a motion on the minutes?
I move to approve with the addition that was passed on.
Second.
Aye, second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Welcome, Senator Smith. Starting my agenda. All right, I think that there's just committee reports. We'll start with the audit committee. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The audit committee met this morning with a very full agenda. I believe everyone was there except Senator Sales. So I'll try to be as brief as I can. We started with an update on the status of the 2018 financial audit being undergone by the Legislative Audit Division. We did receive our final SOT audit related to that from Whipley on October 15th, and it was distributed. LAD has been on site since October 8th and should be done with their on-site work by the end of November. We did receive a memo of non-trivial misstatements from the legislative auditor for the enterprise fund. We will be responding.
Cap loans. One was to the St. Ignatius School District. That was for $1,157,973 to provide for funds for their maintenance projects. The other one we approved was also to the school, Hamilton School District. They wanted to borrow $1,500,000 to finance part of their daily elementary rehabilitation. So they're working on updating their school there. It's a big project. The total project is $8 million. Our part that we approved is the $1,500,000. And so that was the action of the loan committee. No further approvals needed from the full board because of the loan amount.
Thank you. Questions on the loan committee report? All right. Thank you, Jack. Seeing none, we'll go on to the human resources committee report. Carl?
We have nothing that requires board action. We met as we do every year at our November meeting and went through the annual reviews of the exempt staff. And then the other thing we did was work with the new executive director as we, now that he's been on the job for a whole month, to sort of figure out his work plan for the year. That's it.
All right. Thank you. Questions? All right. Seeing none. TRS, PERS board members. Go ahead.
So, the Imperial Board met once, and our big issue that we discussed was the actuarial evaluation, and I believe Deputy Director Schwimden will be here to present sometime in this meeting to discuss the findings.
Okay.
That was it. It was enough.
Okay.
At the teacher's retirement system, a majority of our meeting, of course, was also the evaluation. And some specifics will be given by myself. In-depth will come from Mr. Graham tomorrow. A couple of things I would point out with legislature coming up. We at TRS will have some things that we need to clean up in the last legislative session. There were changes to statutes dealing with beneficiaries, trusts, those sorts of things. And our statute is referred to those. So that would, of course, necessitate some specifics within our own statutes. So designations of who beneficiaries are, definitions of that, how they can change and what the process for those changes. We will need to present some cleanup language that would allow for these things to take place. We also need to make sure that we talk a little bit about defining trusts and estates. For an estate or a trust to be named as a beneficiary, of course, as a retirement system, you can't pay those retirement funds in perpetuity. So we'll have to embed those definitions in our own statutes. And another issue through the evaluation, but also through legislation, that's always important that we have to try and deal with every 2 years, is, as you may recall, the university system was at one time part of the teacher's retirement system. Years ago, they were allowed to either have a choice and then eventually not a choice, not being in TRS. So there were costs associated with that. The basic plan was to get through 2033 to pay that down to zero unfunded liability. And those dollar amounts really haven't changed since 2007. Currently, the youth system pays 4.72% into the teacher's retirement for this unfunded liability. Through this actuary study, in the years remaining to get to 2033, that contribution would actually have to be 11.89% and not 4.72. We have continuously tried to get the legislature to adjust that. Of course, there's a finite pool. We will have legislation out to try and get that to take place. But again, that's a pretty significant difference. Right now, certainly wouldn't be paid off on 2033, continuing at 4.72%. A few highlights of the valuation. First of all, there were 527 retirees in our spring count, which is about par for a system that's along in age. As we all know on the board, it was a pretty good year for investment returns. That showed in some of the valuations, but also recall the last time that we met, I let you know that we did make some changes in a few of the assumptions that the actuary uses to make those valuations. Those were a bit of a drag on some of the data that you'll hear more about tomorrow. But essentially our funded ratio dropped by about 2% because of the new changes. Still reasonable, 68.19%. That did change by a couple of years also the amount of time to pay off that unfunded liability. Again, not a huge change, but the changing in those assumptions made a bit of a difference. And moving forward, of course, we're going to have to continue to look at those as everything else in the country changes. Hopefully we'll keep the valuation up and the funding ratio high. That is my report.
When you were talking about those definitions, was that for a proposed statute? Or was it an existing statute? I didn't know.
It was an existing statute, but they actually took that statute out and moved those things elsewhere. And so our statute referred to those.
Oh, okay.
And so now we actually want to try and put those in our own statute so we don't have to continuously do that if those things change.
I just missed that part. Any questions? All right, let's go to the liaisons. Last in, first out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's a busy week for the legislature. We're caucusing this week. You probably remember how much fun that is. So there's a lot of weeping, gnashing of teeth, backbiting, deal making. I can't wait till tomorrow. I feel like a kid before Christmas. So I'll be glad. I'll be glad when tomorrow's over. And then we'll know the lay of the land in terms of leadership in the Senate and the House, and we can start making plans going forward. That's about it.
Thanks. Jim.
Well, Scott has so much more time in the legislature than I do. I have a whole different picture of the week. So. Maybe I'm going to get a little anxious here. I think we have a little different things at risk too. Actually, several of you had asked me the results of the election and getting the final numbers, so that's just what I wanted to touch on. In the House, there were 2 seats formerly held by Democrats that Republicans won, and 3 seats formerly held by Republicans that Democrats won. So the Democrats have a net +1 there. We have one other seat that is in dispute. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but it's probably going to end up in a recount. a 6, or will end up in recount, 6 votes. Separate those, and that's in Great Falls. Over on the Senate side, Republicans picked up 2 seats formerly held by Democrats, other way around. Democrats picked up 2 seats formerly held by Republicans. Republicans didn't pick up any seats formerly held by Democrats, so that'll be a 30-20 mix at this point. 1 or 2 that were fairly close and could have changed things some, but that's the way it turned out. And so the final number, 30-20 in the Senate, Republicans have the advantage there, of course. And it looks like one, maybe two pickups for the Democrats, but let's call it one for the moment, so it would probably be 58-42 Republicans in the House. Pass the result.
Thank you. So before we go to lunch, I have an announcement that in case you think that I've been attacked or something because my face is red and I appear to be falling asleep and you've been getting strange emails from me. None of those is related. I'm doing a treatment for precancerous skin. My back didn't allow me to have any sleep last night. And for some reason, we've been hacked, and people are getting emails from me saying I'm out of money and I need to talk to them. None of the above was true, so let's break for lunch.
Everybody's got to go from your page for it.
All right, we'll get started. We are up to new executive director reports.
Dr. Bell. Mr. Chairman, you have my memo with addressed to member requests from prior meeting, the snapshot. We did review securities litigation this morning with the audit committee, as well as the annual report and financial statements. November is typically the time we remind you of the governor's letter regarding public participation. That is included for you as well. Specifically, you have the draft 2019 board meeting dates. If we return to that page, it's in tab 2. These are what work for us, but these dates are more about you. So do these dates work for you?
November 1 on my birthday. Does that count?
Well, that's cake.
All right.
Do we sing now or then? Well, I didn't want to miss the opportunity.
Other than birthday, other than the chairman's birthday, are there any other downstream concerns with these meeting dates?
That one's upstream.
If not, we'll run with these dates, so you can calendar them in now. And then you also have attached the work plan for calendar year 19 on the 2-year work and education plan. This is what 19 would look like. If there's anything in particular that you'd like added to that, happy to incorporate them or take comments. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, Resolution 212, you also have as a point of information, the amendments for managers in and managers out. Resolution 217, yeah, every November, we have to report to you on who's in the money, who's out of the money. So that's this memo from me.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay, questions, comments? All right, seeing none. We move on to cleans up. Did you have something, Joe?
Me, no.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Under tab 3 is my memorandum. I'll just go through this here with you. If you have any questions, please, you can interrupt me. But as of October 15th of this year, the commercial loan portfolio had a loan balance of $177,945.46, and it represents 108 individual loans or participation. Since our last meeting, we funded 4 intramural relending program loans totaling $123,916. And we did a infrastructure loan to Valley County Economic Development Authority for Iron Haws Inc., which is located in Hamilton, for $269,531. There are 7 loan reservations that total $21,598,000, and 6 loans have been committed that total $31,525,000. And And those reservations and commitments are attached. We did have the opportunity to discuss some of those at the loan committee meeting, but if you do have any questions, please let me know. The commercial loan portfolio, excluding the Veterans Home Loan Program and Science and Technology, has a yield of 3.12%. There is the one commercial loan that is past due over 30 days, which has the balance of $670,418. That's the on-the-board property in Great Falls, and we did talk about that at the loan committee. So we're hoping that we've got a couple of interested parties, and we have that property sold within the next 3 to 4 months. The residential loan portfolio has a balance as of October 18th of $4,449,667, and that is 108 loans. The portfolio has a yield of 6.65%. There's no outstanding reservations. There are 2 loans that are delinquent, that are over 90 days past due. They total $138,543, and that represents 3.1% of the portfolio. Both of those loans have FHA guarantees on them, so there's no risk of loss for us on those loans if they do actually go into foreclosure. The Veterans Home mortgage portfolio has an outstanding balance as of October 18th of $38,965,736, and that represents 228 loans. There are 3 reservations totaling $772,701, and after taking these reservations into consideration, there's a remaining balance of $261,563 in that program. The portfolio has a yield of 1.86%. There is one loan over 90 days past due, and that loan is in foreclosure. That total amount is $170,238, or 0.46 of the portfolio. So with that, does anybody have any questions?
My question is on for the capacity of the Veterans Home Mortgage Program, that's 40 million, right?
That's correct.
And so how quickly does more capacity become available?
There is about 80,000 principal reduction every month, and there's been some payoffs too along the way. My guess, if the loan size stays where it's at, it's right between 200 to 225,000. We'd be able to make about 4 to 5 loans a year, just with the repayments that are coming in.
I have a question on reserve loans. Are you going to talk about those?
Yeah, we can talk about reservations.
How much have we already loaned to Neptune?
That's a good question.
Sorry.
I can get that exact number to you.
And how about Consumer Direct?
I can get that number to you also on
Yeah.
that. We did make the loan to Neptune to purchase the 6 jets that they currently use to fight fires with. Then we also made them an infrastructure loan to build a hangar, and that loan has been paid in full. And so out of these loans that show up here on Neptune Aviation, 2 of them are for the building of an additional hangar, and then one of them is for the purchase of 3 additional jets for firefighting.
And you said that Consumer Direct is to build another building.
That's correct.
Wasn't that 35 to 40 range? The first one, 35 to 40 range? For the building?
35 to 40 million?
Yeah.
No, not our portion.
Oh, okay.
On that. No, it was way smaller than that. We did a participation loan and an infrastructure loan to Consumer Direct. And I believe, I better get the numbers.
Can I just ask one? What's the William, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, what is that project for?
That's for a brewery in Bozeman, Montana.
Can't lose.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Louise is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the board. I think we have covered most of, by the way, bond program is behind tab 4. I believe we've covered most of everyone's questions in loan committee. So were there anything involved with the activity summary? Does anyone have any questions about that? We are a little more quiet this year, and I can speculate, but no sense in
I
speculating.
don't think people went by up, you might have anything.
Maybe.
What else do you think is?
I just think it's the interest rates climbing, really. And when we're seeing the short-term rates going like this, anyone that's following the program is going to know that we're going to go up too. So if they can nail down a fixed, I think that's what they're doing. It's only speculation. I don't know. I don't have a for sure on that. Yeah. So no questions on activity summary? Okay. And I think we've covered any questions we had on staff approved, unless we had more of that. No? Okay. If I may, I just found out today that Jerry plans on retiring without an official send-off. So, working alongside each other over 18 years now, as much as she'll hate this, I can't let that happen without saying a few words. This is our last board meeting together. First, we need to thank her family. In our years working together, I've seen how many late nights and weekends Jerry devoted to the success of the board. She is a hardworking powerhouse that many of us depend on. Eagle eyes of a highly respected news editor, willing to stop what she was doing to help the rest of the team, and always with impeccable style and grace. Never once, or perhaps did she ever let us see her knees buckle under the pressure. What can I say to you other than thank you? Thank you for your guidance, your support, and your mentorship. Thank you for setting the bar so blasted high. My shoulder hurts trying to reach it. I can prove it. I have a doctor's appointment today to get it checked. We watched your children grow up to become teachers and parents, and now Jerry is a grandma. I can say with complete confidence, Jerry, that you have made your parents proud, your family proud, and now with a clear conscience of a job well done, go and enjoy the unfettered life of retirement. To you, Jerry, my deepest respect and most sincere best wishes to you and yours in the days to come. And with that, Board Chairman, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. I don't think we can top that. Where are we? We are at
Private development,
he's going to give it a shot.
private investments due diligence.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Are you gonna cry?
I'm a little welled up, if I'm honest, yeah. So we've been pretty quiet since the last time we met. We made one commitment. That's to Pangea 3, $40 million. Pangea 3 is a fund managed by a group called Cartesian Capital Group, which spun out of AIG many years ago. Some things we liked about this group. They've got a global footprint. They are very opportunistic in their approach across geographies and sectors. They're very stable, established, well-pedigreed
intellectual team that has provided fund returns to us in the Fund 2 that have been accretive to our portfolio and additive from many different perspectives, not just a performance perspective. They are a growth equity shop that has an eye for value. They employ very low leverage. They're not a buyout shop. They have a very differentiated deal flow pipeline, a broad network. They cultivate relationships over a very long period of time. I think their Fund 2 is at a 1.4 times net and almost a 12% net IRR. They've got a strong view towards risk management and downside protection and how they structure their investments. And so we did our diligence, ran them through the process, and we re-upped. And we expressed our conviction through an increased commitment.
Is this new, this no investment will be made in companies whose primary business is production of tobacco products or firearms? Is that new to this tier, or have they done that on all of their?
That is not new.
So they've done that all of them?
That's correct. Any other questions?
Just a comment, again, I really appreciate how this is laid out and definitions on the back.
Sure.
Made it much easier.
Credit to my team for producing that, so I appreciate the acknowledgement. Thank you. Okay, I'll see you back here shortly.
Thanks, sir.
So that moves us up to Randy.
Afternoon, everyone. The Public Markets Group performs due diligence. Public Markets Group performed due diligence and hired 2 new managers since the last board meeting. Steve will talk about the first one, which is in the diversifying strategies asset allocation, and I will discuss the second.
Sure. Happy for the opportunity to present. GMO, Benchmark Free Allocation Strategy. This is, I guess I would consider it the first external manager hired for the diversifying strategies asset class, which is in addition to the internally managed long treasury portfolio that we already have. The idea of this strategy is to be absolute return. Technically speaking, their internal goal is CPI plus 5%, but our goal for them and for I guess I would say the asset class in general is just for these managers to generate positive absolute returns over a long period of time, and so we've just strictly characterized them as absolute return rather than trying to peg them to a specific number. They're absolute return managers, not relative return to a benchmark, which is different than what we've done for most managers in public market space. We do consider them a public market investment because most of they invest in other funds primarily managed by GMO that can be bond funds, that can be equity funds, that could be currency funds, but basically entirely public market type investments. There's nothing that they invest in that would be considered in the private markets realm, so that's why we're continuing to consider them a public markets manager and will be overseen by those of us in public markets. 3 original founders, 2 of them have retired, 1 remains involved in the business. The head of this particular strategy, Ben Inker, has basically been with GMO his entire career since he graduated from Yale, so he's definitely well enmeshed in the business. Jason and I did at the end of August an on-site with them in Boston, met with a whole slew of people from the team, from the CEO all the way down to operations people, so we wanted to, being as how this is a new investment that the board has allowed us to make in this area, we wanted to have conviction and comfort that this was a good investment for us, and so after meeting with them in person, we continued to feel that was the case, made an initial funding with them of $50 million just over a month ago, and away we go.
So we're paying as a management fee, 0.87, but
Yep.
within each of the funds, is there a management fee also?
No, it's, basically, we just pay that one rolled up fee, so it's not double counting fees, so to speak. So that 87% is just a
also-
flat fee.
Even there, I mean, like a mutual fund, there's two fees. This, we're not paying that internal operation fee in the funds.
I believe that would be a portion of that 87.
Okay.
So it's, yeah, I mean, this basically is a mutual fund investment.
Yeah.
That's the way it's structured, so we don't cut them a check as we do with a separately managed account.
Okay.
That 87% is embedded in.
So to say it another way, the absolute return you're seeking would be net.
That is correct, that is correct.
So we've probably talked about this, but in an absolute return environment, how do we evaluate performance?
That's a good question. That's one of the unique characteristics, I guess, of this space, which you're going to be in an absolute return, is that, ideally, when we look at absolute return, these managers will tell us, and this manager, for instance, will tell us something like, they expect to do CPI plus 3 or CPI plus 2%. And that's the way, if you were to put a benchmark on these people, that's what you would do, is you would give them a benchmark, that's CPI plus something, or if they're shooting for an absolute return of say like 7%, then you would have that as their bogey, would be 7%. That would be your so-called benchmark for an absolute return strategy. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Sort of.
it does, sort of.
Yeah, no,
So they do actually have, or at least in your mind, there is a performance level there that you're expecting them to hit,
yes.
but we're not making it official.
Correct.
Can I just add something quick, and you can correct me, because this is a difficult thing to benchmark. So, I mean, I would probably think back to what is your objective to the diversifying strategies asset class, which is essentially to get a positive return, but in a way that differs, particularly for equity, from equity in your portfolio. So that's going to be key. I mean, I would think with a GMO benchmark rate, and we've seen funds like this, and when they don't perform, probably the big frustration is less in terms of what their absolute level of return over a long period of time is, but more how are they moving with the markets. If they go up with equity markets and then go down with equity markets pretty significantly, then the question is, well, what are they really doing? And my guess is there's some element of that, so it's less about what their return is, and that is a question too. I mean, they can't just provide 0 for 10 years, but it's also how it relates to other areas of the portfolio, particularly equities. I don't know if does that help?
And you're also seeing low volatility, right, with the 5 to 10?
That level of volatility actually would be consistent broadly with the equity markets in general. It's fairly comparable.
Oh, so you're not really seeking...
It's not intended to be necessarily a low volatility
So really
strategy.
diversification would be really the thing we're looking for here.
Right, and that's why we have it in this bucket as opposed to any other bucket, I guess I would say.
Question.
Yeah.
Did you say earlier that they have told you to put CPI plus 6?
Plus 5.
Plus 5.
That's right. And when we first did due diligence on them, I'm not sure what the number is as of this moment, but as of the end of March, when we were really deep in the diligence on this, since the inception of the fund, they were ahead of that target by 210 basis points, for what it's worth. So they do have an internal goal, and they have beaten it. That's just, again, we're trying to shy away, I guess I would say, from promoting that as the goal specifically. It's more to hit that number than it is to beat it by 210 or whatever. But it's a fair question, and for what it's worth, they have internally to their own goal.
So always these are long-term investments. Define long-term when we're looking at one. Through a market cycle or two, or what?
I'll defer to our CIO.
since you couldn't go hunting.
So if I could, Mr. Chairman, I'll try to address both topics. Yeah, long-term, as it's easy to say those words and say, okay, that's in the future, but long-term isn't defined by any one number. And this isn't just for this strategy, it's any strategy. But when we say long-term, we are talking about things like a full market cycle. That's just a additional, well, what does that mean, right? We want to see different types of markets and then have an opportunity to say, are these managers performing and executing on a strategy like we would expect? Historically, that would be in the neighborhood of, say, 5 to 10 years. It could take longer, right? The market cycle that we're in now is going longer than past market cycles, but it could be shorter. So we're not so much focused on so many years as we are as paying attention to what's going on and did the manager perform well in that type of market and set of conditions. And long-term should allow us to experience in the portfolio to experience various conditions across the market. But if I had to say something between 5 to 10 years.
So is this supposed to protect us in down markets? Is that the general idea?
So, simply yes, but most people you say, well, what is a down market and what got you there, right? And so in our portfolio, the ups and downs, because of our risk exposure, is very much tied to the public equity markets, right? And so we would define a down market as when public equities are going down in a meaningful way. And so that is the difference of this strategy. Most of our strategies in public equity, whether it be US or non-US, are relative to a benchmark. And they try to outperform that by 1% or 2%. But the reality is, as the market swings up or down 20%, they're going to go up and down with that. This strategy is being employed to be independent of that. If the public markets go up 20%, this strategy likely will not participate in that full move up. The expectation is that it will continue to produce a positive return because it will have some equities, but it will be diversified in other types of strategies, fixed income, but in down markets of when public equities are down 20%, we would not expect this to be down as much. Now, it may be down. It may be down in past scenarios here. It has been down in the neighborhood of, had some negative returns some years, but on average, looking at both that up and down, they are targeting and have achieved this benchmark of CPI plus 5%. That sounds complex. The reality here, think of CPI as cash, right? Because cash tends to perform in line with inflation, plus 5%. So today that's 2%, plus 5%. We're in the neighborhood of our actuarial return. So our goal here over time is this is a contributor to help us achieve our actuarial returns for the plan. But how they're going about it is a different strategy than what our US equity managers are doing, our non-US equity, or our fixed income managers. So we're hoping for both diversification and over a longer period of time, a return that is beneficial to the plan. So the benchmark here is a little fuzzier, but the process is no different than the other public market managers. We're going to look at them and say, are they employing a strategy that's consistent with our expectations? Being diversified and over time looking at the performance they achieve.
If I could clarify something on the volatility, the 5 to 10% volatility, the S&P 500 volatility has actually been in that range for the last 3 years, but when you extend to a 10-year period, it's more like 14 for the S&P, and our forward-looking assumptions are more like 16%. So this really is expected to have less volatility than a straight-out equity investment. The other thing that I'd mention too is GMO is famous for doing their 7-year capital markets forecasts. And this really factors into their viewpoint, both market cycle and what they think different asset class leadership will be. We have this product on a lot of different client accounts that we work with, so I wanted to mention that. The other thing is, this is also a liquid strategy in mutual fund format for diversifying strategies. So unlike some other areas of the alternatives world that are less liquid, this one is a mutual fund you can redeem easily.
So next quarter, if the markets are down like they have been lately, how is this going to perform?
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, one, I've said there's many differences of long-term, next quarter isn't it, right? But we're already experiencing the next quarter, right? And the next quarter, October was very different than September and earlier in the year. Equity markets are down significantly in October. This fund is probably down a little bit, less than the overall market, because they do have equity exposure, and most of their equity exposure is actually in emerging market equities, given their valuations. So this fund, over the last quarter would be down. But that's not what we're judging them upon. That wouldn't be a surprise, us understanding their strategy, but we believe their strategy, and as they've employed it conservatively, and as they do that going forward, we do think it does position us well to achieve the longer-term actuarial returns for the plans.
One other question. Does GMO offer something like this in a separately managed investment? I mean, it seems like
I don't believe they did.
Okay.
Maybe one other, because we will introduce other diversifying strategies that will likely be in funds. Most of these managers will, but you need to give them more money, right? So if we were making an investment right off the top of a few $100 million, then probably could do it in a separate account. But at this stage, with the amount that we're putting in, and some of these complexities and what they would add to if we were doing a separate account, we've decided that because we have full transparency in the liquidity in the fund and the relative cost of that fund, that's our best position right now. If in the future, this strategy or others like it, if we had a few $100 million invest in it, we would probably head in a direction of a separate account, because with those size of assets, we could probably get lower fees.
Thank you.
Okay, next up for new public market hires is Northern Trust Asset Management. This is a large firm that is one of the kingpins in passive management and indexing. When you go out and look at for index managers, passive index managers, there really is only a few. Scale is really important, and experience is really important in this area, and so there's really only a few that you would look at beyond BlackRock to hire, and we had settled on Northern Trust. The reason we did that, if you look at page 82 in the appendix, you can flip there very quickly. This has been mentioned in previous board meetings. We have a ton of money with BlackRock, and it's largely in index funds, but still, looking at it and thinking about it, we thought, maybe we should diversify among company risk a bit too, so that we don't have as much money with one particular manager. And so that's one of the reasons why in fact, the main reason why we went and looked for another index manager of this nature. As far as Northern Trust is concerned, like I said, they're one of the kingpins in the industry. They've been doing this for several years. They've been doing it successfully, of course. We chose them for the low fee structure as well, compared to the other competitors. And that was something we were looking for, that, when we went to go do this, if we could not get somebody to do it for what we thought would be appropriate from a management fee standpoint, we weren't going to do it. We weren't going to diversify from BlackRock, but we were able to get a very good fee arrangement with Northern Trust. The two portfolio managers who are going to be doing our managing this $500 million for us are listed below. Both have been with the firm for several years, have substantial experience, and so we were comfortable as well. Like I said, $500 million to start with this manager. This is actually going to be a separate account at State Street, which is the first time we've actually had a separate account for an index fund at State Street. And we're looking forward to trying that out and seeing how we like it. One of the advantages of having a separate account when you have an index fund like this is those dollars, those assets, like $500 million in assets, can be lent out through securities lending, whereas if you're in a commingled fund, although they're lent out, the fund itself earns the securities lending on it rather than us, the state of Montana directly. So that's one reason I wanted to do a separate account for this.
So the money comes from where?
From BlackRock. Yes.
And is this a similar fee structure to BlackRock? Andy?
It is, yes.
You said it's slightly less though?
Slightly less than the other competitors.
But about the same as BlackRock?
Yeah, inclusive of BlackRock, yeah.
And I assume there were no implementation costs, right?
Correct. I believe we talked, was Mike here? We talked about this transition last meeting, right?
No, we didn't. But because we were transferring from one strategy to another that was identical, we took a slice of securities out of the BlackRock fund and moved them into the Northern Trust account, separate account, and they took possession of those securities. The only fee that was associated with this particular transfer, a lot of it was, again, because there was so much overlap, it was perfect overlap almost between the portfolios. But JP Morgan, who is the custodian of the securities for BlackRock, charged a delivery fee. I think it was $2 or plus or minus $2 per security. So implementation cost, I think, was $1,560.
Yeah, it wasn't I might come back to me now, but it wasn't a transition specifically like we would present to the board because it was just basically taking a slice from BlackRock and moving to State Street to be managed by Northern. Yeah. Any other questions on Northern Trust asset management? Very good. I'll be back a little later.
All set? Chairman, so we're going to turn to tab 6, the investment update. And before we start flipping through here, a few comments to make. One, this is a pretty hefty tab when it comes to number of pages, and so this is 92 pages. And so one comment I wanted to make is regard to the appendix, which starts, I don't know, on page 63. So we have about 30 pages in appendix. As we were putting this together for this board meeting, we always want to provide the information that the board members find useful, and we want to provide a lot of transparency. But since we've started using this format, we have not regularly, if at all, really referred to the information in the appendix. It's information that we have and will continue to produce, and staff can utilize it. But the question for all of the board members is, going forward, how important is it to you to have these 30 extra pages in the appendix? And are there certain pages or all of it that you find helpful? We don't want to put it in front of you and make you feel like you need to read it and us not present it. We're open all the time to any questions that might be covered in that material, even if we don't have it. So that's something wanted to put in front of you, and either today or as we move forward to the next meeting, get your thoughts on these 30 pages of an appendix, whether you felt it was helpful for your needs or not.
You want it now?
Well, if,
Put it on the checklist and we'll talk about it. Unless you want to
Okay.
put it down.
No, that's what I was asking. When do you want to do this?
We just put that on our checklist for tomorrow, or do you want to hear now?
if you want, I want to do it whenever is the best timing for
Why don't we
you.
go through the report and then judge, have everybody judge whether or not it's useful, and we'll come back to it tomorrow, but.
Yeah, and that sounds good. We could come back, and even if it's after the meeting, you know, you just want to send an email to clarify, that's helpful. Again, it's not, oh, you need to decide, and this information, if you decide not to have it, will never be available. We have the information, we can answer questions, but, so we can leave that till tomorrow. The other thing before we turn into the materials here that I want to point out is this information is through September 30th, right? And that's very much important at this point because October was a different month in terms of the markets, and you'll hear more about that as we move forward. RBK might have some comments, but more so when we get to February. It has at least started off in October to be a very volatile quarter. You know, public equities, S&P down about 6% since the beginning of October. So keep that in mind as we go through here. We'll see how that plays out. But I wanted to recognize that since this material has been put together, there have been some meaningful changes in the markets.
And that's Joe's cover for me, that just because I started when the markets went down doesn't mean I started. I'll hold that against my performance.
Correlation, but no causation.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we could turn to page 4 and spend just a few quick minutes here. I mean, you look at this page, this is what we would hope to see. You know, every time we flip through this material, because the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year numbers are all in line with what our longer term goals are, and even the 20 year and 24 year numbers are not, you know, too far different from what those goals. So the recent past and even the intermediate past have been very good from an investment market standpoint and have helped deliver the objectives for the different pension plans. On page 5, just another way of showing it, you'll see the start as of a year ago, or 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and what has happened to these assets and changes. In all cases, you'll see that the red bar increases the further we go out. This is how much we distribute from these plans to support their main need, the benefit payments. And so in the last year, the $438 million is what we paid for benefits. The good thing is that the green bar right next to it, the dollar value added, was multiple times greater. So that's why the assets year over year and over each of these periods have increased. Again, a good thing to say, but no surprises for given the investment performance that the plans keep growing and we keep being able to, without any issues with liquidity, pay the benefit payments. Page 6, just a different view of the same information. All the plans have gone up, in total about $557 million, as you'll see in the bottom right, over the last year, and about $11.8 billion in pension assets as of the end of 9/30. Page 7 gets a little bit more interesting in what you'll hear more about. You see this color chart, you see the colors moving around. But if you, I guess it's brown. If you look at the 1 year at the top and you see the MSCI US IMI, that is our benchmark for our US equity asset class, which is the biggest asset class in the pension portfolio. To see that at the top for the 1 year, 5 year, and the second position for 10, 15, and 20, that's why the returns over all these periods have been good. And given the historic and current weighting of the U.S. equity asset class, that's that bias of our portfolios to have more U.S. than non-U.S. equity, this has been the ideal period for that. This is a little unusual. Usually we would see things move around a little bit more over time across asset classes, but it has been good position and resulted in good returns. But as you go down, you'll see that the non-US equities, so this is the blue about, I don't know, 60% of the way down, it says MSCI, ACWI, ex-USA, IMI up 1.79%. You get the difference between US equities and non-US equities. That is a huge gap in 1 year, and currency was a big driver there. So currency has favored the US dollar as opposed to non-US dollar currencies. And then lastly, you look down the 1 year column, you'll see a number of the fixed income asset classes around zero or slightly negative. And the reason for that is interest rates have been going up, and that over the period of time that it has occurred have resulted in negative returns given the interest rate sensitivity of those portfolios. So,
Which one is that?
this is, so if you look at the last four in column one, the Barclays US corporate, that yellow-orange, it's a negative 0.64 number. That's our index for corporates. The one below it is mortgage-backed securities. The one below that is treasuries. And the last one is a representative of the US Ag. That's kind of all of them tied together, but a little bit longer duration than the other three. So those have been negative returns over the last 1 year period because interest rates have made a decent move in that period. So again, always good to keep in mind this picture. Our current strategy has benefited from it, but you have seen and will continue to see we are in the process of even further, and I'll talk about it more tomorrow when we talk about asset allocation, but more further diversifying our portfolio and likely reducing U.S. equities as we go forward. Any other questions about this slide?
Why is there not a 20-year history for MSCI USA small cap?
Yeah, so there are, I don't know off the top of my head, but there's 4 of these asset classes that don't have a 20-year history. That's because the benchmarks don't go back that far. In the case of specifically the ACWI US small cap, I don't know when that started. Again, the standard ACWI benchmark we use represents most of the market. I'll need to look into that, John, because I would have thought on a 20-year period they would have had that, but maybe it was just after that they started that specific benchmark. Turning to page 8, nothing special to note here other than all current allocations and as of 9:30 are within the board approved ranges, which are on the right-hand side of the chart. Page 9 shows you a little bit how they moved around in the last year. You'll see that some of the bigger detractions are on the fixed income asset classes that have slightly negative returns, and domestic equity up 0.1. The reason for that, the returns have been so strong, but as it went higher, we kept selling U.S. equities, and so the allocation is about the same, and so the allocation hasn't changed that much, but we've benefited in the portfolio from the market moving higher in U.S. equities. High yield and cash were both added to over the last kind of year to take some of these sales we did in domestic equity over the last year flowed to high yield into cash, and so that's why those are a little bit higher. Same thing with the 0.4% in diversifying strategies, which at this time was just the long U.S. Treasuries.
I'm surprised that there's any growth at all in the long U.S. Treasuries. I think you're showing on the next page at 0. Was this change in allocation just due to the changes of the other ones?
So a year ago for diversifying strategies, it was 0.
Right.
And now it's effectively 0.4, so that was the increase. Maybe I don't get the question.
Well, all I was wondering, I was actually going forward to the next one, looking at total returns. I'm just surprised that other bond asset classes were down, and this is showing that there was zero return for the long treasuries, and I would have thought long treasuries would have suffered even more than other assets.
Yeah, long treasuries did. This is zero partly because within the diversifying strategies where those long treasuries are hold, we didn't hold them for the full 1 year period. So nothing's being showed there. But since we held them, we bought 25 million in February and another 25 million a few months ago. They are down. And so, so if we were looking at this whole chart, not over a 1 year basis, but over a 3 month or a 6 month basis, you would see diversifying strategies being down because of that negative performance of long treasuries. Page 10, again, is just to show you the view similar to what I've already described. Domestic equity up, fixed income neutral to slightly down, and just gives you a sense graphically the 1 year returns. And so unless there are questions, I'll stop there and I'll hand it over to risk management that will talk about the contribution of those returns and some other things going forward. But before I do that, any last questions? Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, board members, Dan Zarling, I want to go over the risk management slides. And as a reminder, it's myself and Aaron Kirkland that put together this information. And I'm on slide 11, and this is going over the contribution to total return through the third quarter. And this is our performance attribution. We take what our exposure or the weight is in each of these asset classes, multiply it by return, put it in a bridge table so that you can see it's a familiar story, I hope, that the majority of our returns are coming from domestic equity. Any questions there? So the next slide I want to go over is our top 10 managers. And we look at the concentration of our managers just to make sure that they're within policy and that everything is okay. And so typically BlackRock comes out on top there. They're our passive manager. And I guess one thing I can say there is that next quarter when we show Northern Trust that we commented on, it's going to be basically shaving or reducing BlackRock's exposure. Something in the neighborhood of 4%. So this will look a little bit different next time we go through the next quarter. But for the most part, this stays relatively the same, and whether it be internal management or the external managers. So on page 13 is our our geographic exposure of the portfolio, and again, we do this from the bottom up. We aggregate everything up. We take a look at it by region, country, and foreign currency. Again, it's kind of telling the same story as in the past. I will note that, the way we look at this view and we show our top exposure, say, by country, and we line it up to an equity global benchmark, so it's not a perfect comparison. And in fact, if you took this and just looked at what are the country exposures for the benchmark, which is at MSCI, ACWI, IMI, it includes everything, it would be relatively the same. It's interesting though that it would go like the United States, Japan, United Kingdom, and then China would be up there slightly ahead of Canada if you were trying to rank it by the order of what's in the benchmark. And I just want to make note of that because we did this order based on what was in the portfolio. But so China is a significant kind of country weight when you start looking at these things in terms of the top 10. Any comments or thoughts there? So on slide 14, we're trying to show what our overall sector exposure looks like. And Again, this is a look-through basis from the bottoms up. Again, we do have a little bit of exposure to real estate compared to this global equity benchmark. And that's to be expected, I think, and then we have, our exposure to U.S. Treasuries as an example. That's not in the benchmark. That's, again, kind of our cash management. I'll go into that in a little bit, but I think this is fairly typical. Again, there hasn't been any big changes. It's just trying to show what our exposures are, though, when you look across all of the accounts, across all the asset classes. And so we do the same thing on the next slide, page 15, which is our kind of holdings by security. And we tried to put a little bit of color in this so that you can see, you get a sense of where these individual securities are being held in the different asset classes. But again, this is highlighting that the U.S. Treasuries, U.S. agencies when you look at it on an individual basis and we aggregate those up as a security, and you can see that that's kind of our biggest holding right there across various asset classes. Any thoughts there? So my last page then is on page 16, and maybe the most important, so I should probably put up front, is our pension liquidity. And this is where we're taking a look at how much cash is available, not only in CAP, which is what we manage, but at the retirement plan as well. And then we color code it and by asset class, and we make sure that we have sufficient liquidity for pension benefits, or we have sufficient liquidity to move things around, or even things like capital calls, which basically, this is kind of daily management of things where you don't want to be forced to sell something when you know that you have say a capital call that was planned, 2 weeks, 2 months in advance, that sort of thing. But this is just to give you a view of the fact that we have plenty of one-day liquidity, plenty of 1 month liquidity. The one-day liquidity amounts to about, in the cap, it's about 1.8 billion. In total, it's about 2 billion. And then we talked about this before, but this would be sufficient to, cover several years of pension benefits. But theoretically, because that would never really, you don't want that to happen. But this is our margin of safety, so that we're not having to force to sell something such as equities in a down market, things like that. So that's really, this is our exposure to the portfolio. And are there any thoughts or questions that people have?
How are you feeling about our risk profile?
Thanks, John, that's good. I sleep well at night. Had a good sleep last night, so it's, it is what it is, because we know that we have we have this exposure to equities in general, domestic equities in particular, and again, we like the fact that, say, over the past couple of years, we've been kind of reducing that exposure and putting it into other areas. And we've talked about this, but the long duration treasuries or diversifying strategies. I think putting it in GMO is, these are all kind of the right diversifying moves that you want to see. And so that does give me some comfort, and it's just the fact that we are taking it from equities. That's good. That's kind of that direct reducing that exposure. And then again, we're trying to keep a discussion going as to, well, what other diversifying measures that we can do, or what other, either the beta sensitivity or exposure that we have that we might have control to kind of move around or reallocate so that the portfolio has greater stability. And again, it can be a little quantitative or a little forecast, or it's just something that you just try out and you don't know for sure if that's going to happen. But it's worth a discussion, and I guess we're trying to keep that. We're keeping that discussion open so that even if other team members talk about, hey, I have this idea, we can open it up and say, yeah, this is going to if this is going to help the portfolio, then there's going to be a team discussion as to whether we make that move. So it's not something that, directly that we can apply, but it's something that we need to talk about as a group as to how much more stability that can be built into the portfolio, and what's at our discretion.
Thank you.
Okay, then I'll be good.
Members of the board, I'm back. I'm on page 17, and I will be covering the private investments for you today. And as is usual, I'll cover the high points. So starting with private equity, don't mean to sound like a broken record, but buyout activity has been strong. M&A across the globe has been strong. Prices are elevated. The debt markets are open. The IPO market as of last quarter was quite healthy indeed. Secondary transaction volumes remain elevated. Fundraising is healthy. Dry powder continues to grow. Any questions? This is just my standard MO. So if happy to address anything along the way. If no questions, we can move on to performance, which has been strong since inception, 12.6% net IRR. You see the time-weighted returns down below there for the 1, 5, and 10-year periods. Happy to address any questions there. Otherwise, we can move on to the characteristics. Private equity is largely North American-centric. It's buyout focused, focuses on primary funds versus fund of funds, $1.2 billion of net asset value. I would expect on a go-forward basis to continue to see strategies looking at direct lending, continuing to look at Asia. In fact, Michael Wind, one of our investment officers, is in Asia currently. Emily was in Asia last week. It has been additive travel for us, not only from a due diligence perspective, but from a networking perspective, a deal flow perspective. So very supportive of that effort. It was a positive cash flow quarter last quarter, and from an investment perspective, it was pretty light. We already talked about Pangea 3, but of course, happy to answer any questions anyone might have. If not, we can transition from private equity.
Is there anything percolating in the secondary market?
Nothing currently. As we discussed last quarter, we did transact. And we, as just a prudent thing to do, we're always monitoring our portfolio, looking at various management ideas, and it wouldn't surprise me if you continue to see us be active. There are a number of legacy relationships that are an administrative burden. We can redeploy capital in more, potentially higher yielding opportunities. Pricing is rich in secondary land right now across all asset classes, for that matter, as has been touched upon over the past several quarters. But yeah, we'll always look at that, John. There will always be something we're thinking about. Whether we transact or not, it all depends. But yeah, sure, it's the right thing to do.
I'm wondering if it's possible on these due diligence notes to add in sort of the experience level of the folks who are executive management.
Sure.
Is that just something that's commonly done or not done? Or
No. In fact, I believe in years past, we may have had a number of years of relevant experience in an effort to just not dilute the message to you, but just to minimize the amount of information you're consuming. We took that out, but we can certainly add that in. It's one cell. If we just put 15 years or 20 years, is that simply all you're looking for? Yeah, absolutely. No problem at all. We can do that. That just, okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Okay, let me find my place here. Anything else? Okay, let's go to real estate. So again, pretty healthy market we're seeing. Supply demand perspective, pretty good. In fact, in many cases, at least from an industrial multifamily perspective, supply can't keep up with demand. Fundamentals are sound. You've got continued NOI growth. Occupancies are increasing. Transaction volumes across the globe remain healthy. They're not going to be as robust as, I believe, the record-setting year of 2016, but they will still be well in excess of $400 billion globally. Cap rates are stable. You continue to see the U.S. be a recipient of capital from cross-border transactions. There is a continued search for yield in secondary and tertiary markets as capital looks for yield relative to the current CBD, central business district, tier 1 markets here in the U.S. and relative to other asset classes. There's yield to be gained in the outlying markets. And then again, fundraising and dry powder, very healthy fundraising market, and dry powder there again continues to grow, and the financing markets are wide open, across the board, not only from sort of the equity perspective and private equity funds, but all the debt markets, balance sheet lenders, life cos, life companies, CMBS, et cetera. Questions there?
Okay, with the change in interest rates, if they continue to go up faster than we may want, what do you see?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of schools of, well, there's really just two schools of thought there that, that with the rise of interest rates, cap rates will follow and values will decline. And then the other argument is there's no correlation. And those folks that really focus on it and sort of avoid the headlines really tend to look at the underlying economy. And so if you think about where we are now, we're at 3.7% unemployment. Last quarter, we were at 3.5% GDP, so we're growing, we're adding jobs. Vacancies continue to decline. Space continues to be taken up. Net operating income continues to grow at inflationary or above inflationary rates. So all those trends continue even in the face of a rising interest rate environment. In addition to the crush of capital that continues to come into the United States, values will continue to be supported.
That's pretty sustainable.
If those dynamics sustain themselves in perpetuity, then yeah, I would wager a guess and say, yeah, that's absolutely sustainable. But as we all know, real estate is one of the most cyclical investment strategies out there. So at some point, the shoe's going to drop and things will turn. But in this sort of slow growth environment, assuming, as I said, Jeff, those other dynamics sort of maintain themselves, values will remain stable. They may adjust on the margin here or there, but and they've certainly slowed, no doubt about it. And as I've mentioned in past board meetings, the preponderance of your return going forward from here, my expectation, I think what's been borne out in the numbers, is sort of your income return. Capital appreciation is definitely moderated, but I mean, it's still ticking up without a doubt, just not in the sort of velocity that it has been over the last 5 to 8 years since we dove, and then just going up into the right since.
Thank you.
Question. With the changes in the tax law, is that allowed the markets being flush with capital? Is that re-domiciled profits that have come back to the U.S.? Am I correlating things correctly with companies that have money held overseas and now the taxes being much lower to bring that back? Is that playing into this?
Well, I think the tax cuts have certainly been a boon and helped continue to support the real estate markets, but as far as repatriating taxes from overseas or revenues, boy, that is outside my purview, and I can't speak to that with any level of expertise and would hesitate to wager a guess. So apologies for not being able to address that specifically.
So Ethan, could you talk a little bit about in private equity and real estate, our reputational risk? How do you evaluate some of that when you're looking at a manager?
Yeah, so again, real estate, for example, when we're talking to industrial managers, we've come right out in the midst of meetings. Are any of your tenants growing cannabis and violating federal law? No, they aren't. We won't do that, etc. We haven't gone so far yet, I mean, in perfect candor, to actually put that in writing, but now that I'm saying this out loud, it might be something worth considering, for example. Real estate, private equity, given recent events over the last handful of board meetings, in the specific case of JLL, we are getting much more diligent in asking managers, what sorts of industries they're investing in, what sort of industries will they invest in, could they invest in, have they invested in, asking them to go so far as, what do you think about, when you're investing capital for public pension funds, how does their reputation come into play? It's certainly something that we think about and we discussed at length last board meeting. Our reputation, from my perspective, in the marketplace is sterling. People seek us out. GPs have done reference checks on us to see if they wanted to accept our capital, how we behave, how we communicate, and in all circumstances, people wave it in, and it's a two-way street. I want to make sure they're looking out for our best interests. And so, yeah, it's something I think about all the time, Jack. Did I answer your question? Yeah. I feel like maybe I rambled a little bit, so
You did ramble, but I still got an answer.
Okay, thank you. I do that sometimes.
Well, along those lines, then how do we deal with the request we had earlier today?
I think we deal with it in exactly the fashion we dealt with it today.
Okay, and follow-up, is there a follow-up? Do you feel we need to write a letter or anything like that?
If the board would like me to write me a letter, we'd be happy to do so.
What do you think is appropriate?
I think what is appropriate is for us to put the needs of our beneficiaries in our prudent expert rule first and foremost above all else. And that's what drives my decision-making process.
Yeah.
The information that we heard today wasn't necessarily, these things do come up from time to time, and this wasn't necessarily brand new information today. We, on a regular basis, will become aware of different points of view, and as Ethan has said today and in times in the past, we're going to ask questions and understand both sides of any issue and how investment managers look at it and make an assessment over time. Is that manager acting on our best behalf and consistent with our expectations? So we will continue to hear things and seek out opinions like we heard today from all sides and make the best decisions we can make with that information. But there's a point that we have one fiduciary interest, and so we do only have so much time that we can take an active stance from a more of a engaging day-to-day on some of the issues and having letter writing campaigns and stuff like that. That is not necessarily our role, but we need to integrate all this information into our process and have it impact our decisions.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
This prompts me to ask another question. So if a marvelous opportunity existed that was well thought out and in this space, and it had to do with the Colorado opportunity with a home run cannabis business, as long as the returns are there and they meet our criteria and all the rest of it, that would be our governing principle. Is that kind of what I heard you say?
Yeah, so I think that's what you heard me say. You know, the last, you know, look, our role as a fiduciary aside, I don't think the board, the executive director, or staff, or frankly, the citizens of the state of Montana and our beneficiaries want to see us smeared all over the headlines. And so that is part of the decision tree.
Yeah, and I didn't mean that in a snippy way or anything.
Absolutely
I was
not.
just kind of
Yeah,
zeroing
absolutely.
in there, so, yeah.
Understood. Yeah.
But it's not just return, right? We're thinking about risk, we're thinking about it from a number of different perspectives. Some of these businesses are well established, but some are pretty new, right? And that introduces risk, the newer they are, and so there's not just one, there's not just 5 things we look at to make any decision. So we will look at things, but there's many of investment opportunities that we have some conviction it has the potential for a high return, that we don't do it, right? For one reason or another, where we're concerned about it could have high return, but it could have significantly negative return, right? Reputation is part of that, but more importantly is, are we utilizing all these assets in the best way to achieve kind of our mission? And there's some parts of the investment opportunity set that we just don't engage in because it's not worth kind of our time to engage in that. We think other places we can get similar good returns and make investments there. But it's very broad what we are looking at to assess opportunities.
I have 2 questions. Sorry. First is the decision tree. Do you have some sort of structure to a decision tree that you're using in terms of looking at an investment? Of course, it's not just return. What else? I mean, you said you asked some questions.
Yeah, we have a very well-defined investment process that is very closely aligned with our manager evaluation policy. And so there are a number of, in addition to that, part of that process incorporates a 12 or 13-page due diligence questionnaire that has a number of questions along just sort of history, their policies around, you know, ethics and conduct, and, you know, their operating history, hiring, firing practices, etc. So while I use the term decision tree, it's really our investment process is what I'm referring to.
So, I don't want to put you on the spot, so I'm just telling you, give you a chance to help me clarify what it seemed to me that what you said was inconsistent when you said.
I apologize.
This could be just me. But when you said that, for example, if you knew someone had a cannabis operation, yet would fiduciary obligation be your sole consideration? I'm not sure those are inconsistent, but well, I think when you said that you interviewed people, asked them that question ahead of time and take it into consideration, I don't think you were saying that if the returns were good enough, you wouldn't care whether they were violating federal law or not. I don't think that's what you were saying.
I think there was a miscommunication on that, when you answered Jim's question.
I apologize. If they're violating federal law, that would certainly be a non-starter for us. Just to be absolutely
No,
clear.
I just want to make sure I misunderstand what you were saying.
Yeah, and that's actually part of the due diligence questionnaire, you know, how they all, so apologize if I miscommunicated that, but just to be clear for the record, if they violate federal law, that is a non-starter. Drive that one.
State law too.
Right, indeed. Thanks for all the questions, by the way.
But then you've got others too, right? Because you've got a political question or contribution.
Yeah, you know, for example, if we'll ask them to agree in writing, you know, to refrain from any state, federal, or even municipal campaign campaign contributions.
Right.
That's part of, that's actually, if they won't agree to that, that's actually one of the questions that we ask right up front, just in order to be efficient and make sure we're not spinning our wheels and being frankly respectful of their time and not subsequently tarnishing our reputation in the market by being wasteful laggards or what have you. Okay, great. So page 21, you'll see real estate returns. Happy to address any questions there. Otherwise, we can transition to page 22, where we have sort of the characteristics of our $815 million portfolio. Again, North American centric. It's diversified across property types. We've had a increasing focus on operators. Going forward, I would expect new initiatives to include the addition of direct lending in the real estate space, the potential to add a publicly traded REIT strategy. You'll recall we just, not all that long ago, added a high yield CMBS mutual fund position. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
CMBS.
Well, that's not on there. I'm just referring back to a prior meeting when we added.
That's the name of the company?
No, that's a commercial mortgage-backed security. Those are publicly traded portions of the debt capital stack. It was a positive cash flow quarter. There were no new commitments. From a leverage perspective, we were well within our policy constraints. Questions?
A direct lending component, what do you mean?
Essentially, we would be committing to a strategy that is playing the role of a bank instead of a bank or a life insurance company offering the debt financing piece of the overall financing package. The fund would do it.
The fund would do the
Yeah, we'll make loans to fund commercial properties. And they'll back other private equity funds that are offering the equity.
The fund that we're buying into, or you're saying we would?
The fund that we would be buying into.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we will not be taking a direct lending position.
Right, we're not, so-
Yeah, we're not going to be lenders,
Okay.
similar to other portions of our staff.
Right.
Questions?
Is the 2% non-US about right? Or are there other opportunities?
That's a good question. I think about that a lot. I've been thinking about it a lot more. You know, we're allowed up to 30%, and particularly in private equity, we've been spending more time in Asia, trying to harness the growth story over there. You know, I've made it no secret that one of my personal philosophies, biases, however you want to frame it, as it relates to commercial real estate is, you know, North America is still the largest, most highly adjudicated, deepest, most liquid commercial real estate market in the world, where the rules of the game are known. And so why does it make sense for us to spend a whole lot of time trying to gain scale and allocate capital to other parts of the world? And I'm not so sure, you know, I'm open to change, and I think I'll be spending some more time thinking about that. You know, we have the resources to go abroad. I believe we have the networks to understand who we could potentially look at over there, who has the institutional pedigree and the governance and controls to accept our capital and be good stewards of it. So I appreciate the question, and I think it could change. I think, you know, it will. I won't sign on the dotted line there, but it's something I've been spending a lot more time thinking about, for sure.
And would the focus there be Europe or Asia?
I think it would be Asia, at least initially. Europe, I still feel is sort of in stasis. There's opportunities everywhere, Carl, but there's a lot more happening overseas, over in Asia. Just a lot more just macro.
This total leverage, I don't understand the 46.9 as of this date, as of June 30th, and it's got 14.6 core, non-core. What is the 14.6 relative to the 59.6?
So if you disentangle our real estate portfolio and you just look at those strategies that are core open-ended funds, in aggregate, those funds are levered at 14.6%. And then if you look at the closed-end funds, which are largely, constructed of the value add and opportunistic, that in aggregate we call non-core, that's at 59.6. And just to maybe take that a step further, our overall total leverage constraint is 0 to 60, core is 0 to 50, and non-core is 0 to 75. Sure. Anything else?
I have one thing.
Sure.
I really like your key takeaways. I just want to say.
Oh, thanks. You know, I
You
think that
read
was...
through all this and sometimes you scratch your head and think, gosh, did I get anything out of it? But then when you go to the key takeaways.
Yeah, I might credit that, a little bit of that thinking to Joe. He told me to try and keep my comments down to one page. And as I was going through them, I was like, well, maybe just one last bullet point to sum it all up. So if you like that, I'll do my best to keep that going. Okay. All right, great. Any more questions on real estate? All right, let's head off to natural resources. We'll start with timber. So took a little bit of a dip in Pacific Northwest pricing last quarter. A little bit of uncertainty around the tariffs. The U.S. South, which is where we have some fairly significant exposure, and I'll touch upon that a little bit later, is just suffering from classic oversupply as a result of a hangover from the housing crisis. Prices are down. There's a lot of inventory that's going to take a lot of time to work through. In spite of that, lumber has just been on a tear, almost at all-time highs, being supported by a relatively robust housing market, which hasn't fully recovered, but I think on a seasonally adjusted rate, we're back up to about 1.3 million starts per year. We were sort of mediocre through most of the summer, but we had a pretty significant uptick in August, which was nice. Construction spending across the board is expected to increase. Most of the housing starts were represented, it was a disproportionate share in multifamily versus single family, but generally healthy, I'd say. Notwithstanding
If timber is oversupplied, prices of lumber are higher.
So if you think about a tree and how much,
Which Carl does all the time.
and how much, how much lumber, how many 2x4s you can make out of a log, all that's being demanded in high volumes by the housing industry to go build homes and multifamily, which has just been on a tear construction-wise for the last several years, and you just simply don't need as many, there's more trees than it takes to fix the lumber demand perspective, so it's just kind of classic supply and demand. That make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
I might have missed this even when I was out, but it seems like single-family home sales have been down for 5 or 6 months in a row.
They were pretty mediocre through the fall, through summer, but they came up in August. I think my numbers are just through August, so I haven't been paying a whole lot of attention through the fall. But if I think hard, I'm not going to disagree with you by any means. But generally speaking, housing's been recovering, from the doldrums, from the depths. Moving on, let's do it. Energy, what's going on here? M&A has been weak. The capital markets have been relatively closed to public companies wanting to issue equity. Companies are still delevering. They're selling off their non-core assets. Oil, despite what's happened, maybe to Joe's point earlier, what's happened in October, oil prices are still strong and have generally recovered. I think yesterday's tick was Brent was at about $70, WTI was at about $60, so Brent had hit a high of $87 a barrel and has come off that quite substantially, but still relatively strong. The U.S. has surpassed Russia and Saudi Arabia as the top producer in the world, if you can believe that. Pretty amazing. I think people have been saying that for years, and it finally happened. Demand remains strong, and much like the other asset classes, fundraising has been pretty healthy. Dry powder is healthy. Most of the funds have been raised in North America and Europe. Again, healthy markets from that perspective. Questions on energy? Seeing none, we'll slip to 25 and look at performance. You can see timber, that's about expectations. Energy has been a laggard for a few reasons. J-curve, there's a lot of J-curve going on there. Early fund investments that just haven't created a whole lot of value there. And some poor manager selection early on in the portfolio's life. Questions on performance? Seeing none, we'll go to 26 and wrap up here. Again, timber and energy, both North American-centric portfolios. Energy is broadly diversified across the value chain. Timber is broadly diversified across the U.S. and across age class and species. Going forward, I would expect us to add probably at least one other operator in the energy portfolio, one that is more focused on a less risky strategy. It's more focused on what they call PDP, which is proven or produced, proven, developed and proven, which is more highly cash flow generative, and a lot of the value creation that goes on there is not only through, it's not so much focused on a development program, but more increasing cost efficiencies and taking operating costs out. So don't be surprised if that populates at some point, perhaps some direct lending and energy as well. We had positive cash flowing quarters. Our MLP strategy is in place. I recall we committed $40 million to Chickasaw Capital Management a few months back. They are off to the races managing our money, and the MLP space looks well positioned to rebound. It's been very beaten up over the last handful of years, but given the growth strategy, commodity prices, etc., we expect some good things there. So stay tuned. There were no new commitments, and as it relates to leverage in the timber portfolio, we're well within our 30% constraint there. Any questions before we wrap? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I think we're probably close to it, 45 minutes, so it's 3:15, but you're ready for what, right, Jerry? Yeah.
We're ahead, so
Are you? All right, we can take a 15-minute break. Little surprised.
You still have your things like that.
Yeah, we're rolling.
Okay, John, let's take your.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you got all your questions out with Ethan, so this should go much quicker.
No, that was practice.
We'll have to answer. We have to ask them again.
Okay, we'll ask whatever you want. So I am on slide 27, internally managed fixed income. Similar to Ethan, to take a page out of his book, it's a similar story to prior quarters, probably repeating myself in a lot of ways. Treasury curve remains flat over the last year, and then some probably. The Fed has raised interest rates 4 times this year, most recently in September. Expect them to raise rates in December. I think the market's pretty well baked that one in at this point. The forecast from the Fed is that they're going to go 3 more times in 2019 at this point, but I would say the market is probably baked in about 2 of those 3 hikes based on interest rate futures. So we will see. As always, of course, it's kind of data dependent. Inflation has been rising modestly, but quite honestly, probably not quite as quickly as we might have expected, given the tight labor markets and things that we have
had here, and wage inflation has started to pick up just a little bit, but again, maybe somewhat weaker than prior recoveries have been. We've been sitting right about 2.2% for core CPI in September, and tomorrow we'll get another core CPI print for October. Expectation is that it will be the same at 2.2. We'll see. Break-even levels for tips have been kind of a little over 2% here for a while, so not a huge change there. Spreads, much as I've said the last several quarters, I think, have been in a fairly tight relative to long-term historical precedents. So a little below average still at this point. It's been a pretty tight range over the, whether we're looking at agencies or corporates or mortgages, it's been a pretty tight range over the last year. We've probably been in, pick any one of those, it's probably been a 10 to 15 basis point range over the last at least 9 months or so. Go to the next slide here. Intermediate tips were the best performing sector over the course of the entire year. They were the worst for the quarter, but still slightly positive performance there, whereas intermediate treasuries were the worst performing sector over the last year. Bond market liquidity remains good. We've got plenty of new issuance still coming to market across the board. Seems to be good demand from participants in the market. Flows over the secondary flows is measured by FINRA there are pretty much been pretty steady over recent history here anyway, so nothing to suggest that we have any liquidity problems in that sense. Investment grade issuance, as I mentioned, has been strong. As rates have kind of been grinding higher, I think we might see a little bit less issuance here. You notice to some degree a few corporations maybe just not needing to issue as much. They've already kind of termed out a lot of the debt that they've, if they wanted to put things on longer term and lock in low rates, they've generally done so. So maybe a slight downtick there, but the market is open still to them if they want it at this point. Federal Reserve continues to reduce their balance sheet as they've suggested that they would be doing, continue to kind of tick down both within the Treasury and the mortgages portfolios, and that's really just maturities. They're not actively going out and selling things just as things kind of roll off. They're letting that happen. You may recall it was October last year that they started that process. They had a stepped up, each quarter they kind of stepped up to a higher amount that they were going to let roll off, and that kind of in full effect, as it were, as of October 1st, so they've kind of gotten to that point. But still, if you look at the numbers, it would take them another, I think it's like 4 or 5 years before they would actually completely get back down to somewhere near where they were prior to the crisis. I don't really expect that they will let it go that far because obviously the economy's grown, a lot of things have changed, but nonetheless they're fully where they want to be in terms of letting things roll off on a quarterly basis, so that's picked up a little bit. Questions on the environment? Okay, so moving on to the Treasury Agency portfolio returns on page 29, slide 29. Would note that these are net returns, both the total return and relative to benchmark. So negative return for the year for treasuries. Several people have noted already. Eked out a little bit of return above the benchmark, relative return. Not a lot to note here over the course of the quarter. We didn't really make any dramatic changes to positioning. Still sitting at a little below $1 billion in this particular portfolio. A little underweight the 10-year portion of the curve and overweight slightly our kind of based on our range, our agency CMBS and our agency securities. Questions on the Treasury Agency portfolio? Seeing none. TIP, as noted, really the only portfolio here that enjoyed any positive returns over the course of the year. Not really much relative performance to the benchmark because we pretty much are hugging the benchmark at this point in time at any rate. haven't really seen a lot of reason to deviate from that at this point in time. And I think as we've talked about before, there's not as broad a range of securities available within the TIPS universe, so it's generally been kind of as the index rolls each quarter, we kind of tie back out to it a little bit and make any adjustments that we need to do. So it's kind of a once a month type trade at this point in time. No change in the allocation here to how much we held, but definitely been a positive performer at least for the year. Questions on TIPS? Okay, mortgage-backed securities on slide 33. Again, negative return overall for the course of the year. Pretty good relative return to the benchmark here, as we've kind of, I think you've heard my comments in the past, been fairly negative on the mortgage portfolio, mortgages in general, because of the Federal Reserve letting those mortgages roll off of their balance sheet. It's putting more supply back into the market. It's putting kind of some of the least desirable securities that the Fed was buying previously from the market back into the market. So we've seen some modest spread movement there, and then higher rates as well, obviously, in addition. So total market value here, we did reduce the portfolio by about $25 million during the quarter, towards the end of the quarter. That was just really a reallocation to other asset classes, some of the other investment opportunities that we had. We funded a little bit of that by reducing this portfolio a little bit. Again, positioning hasn't really changed significantly from the last go-round. Kind of underweight mortgages a little bit overall, overweight kind of the shorter term 20-year mortgages rather than 30s, duration a little underweight, a little more allocation here in non-agency CMBS, which has helped as well, of course, in the quarter and year. Questions on mortgages? All right, investment grade credit. Again, negative return here slightly for the year, a little bit outperformance relative to the benchmark we were able to eke out. This was driven by slightly wider spreads and certainly higher interest rates. Probably the biggest driver here is the negative return overall. Again, reduced the portfolio just a little bit here by about $20 million during the quarter to fund other things outside of the asset class. Duration remains a little bit below the benchmark, a little bit overweight kind of the middle of the curve, which is based on corporate spreads being kind of similarly flat in a lot of areas to the treasury curve. So feel like going out to like the 5-7 year part of the curve, we're still picking up the majority of that corporate spread over treasuries, and then we're able to roll down the curve rather than going all the way out to the 10s, which is a little bit more attractive point on the curve. A little overweight financials, underweight industrial neutral utilities. That hasn't particularly changed since prior quarters, and overall kind of maintained our bias towards being a little bit up in quality, as we not believe that we're getting paid as well for a lot of the risk that's in the market at this point. A little bit higher leverage in a lot of the companies, and lower spreads, generally speaking. Questions on investment grade corporate credit? See?
Yeah,
this is easy.
Much easier. Yes, sorry. Overweight financials, underweight industrials.
Yep.
About getting to that. Why do you think
Couple of issues there, I guess. So primarily spreads within financials have been a little bit higher probably than they have been in industrials. So a little bit of an advantage there. This is always a little bit difficult for me in some ways, because so if you look at, when I say overweight financials, underweight industrials, that's really on a dollar basis. But when we look at it on a duration basis, so we're overweight financials, but we're on the short end for financials. So we've got a lower overall duration in our financial bucket. And again, the main reason there just tends to be that we're getting a little bit better paid to be there. Financials have been, beaten up. I think some people as the market's gotten a little bit more nervous about corporates in general, sometimes I think people are fighting the last battle, where that was where we saw a lot of the damage the last go around. But also, I've felt for a long, long time, I think we've been overweight financials for probably years, that there's a margin of safety there that probably was not there prior because of all the regulation that's gone into the banking system. So prior to the past crisis, we would have had, capitalization ratios for banks would have been much lower than they are now, because now it's mandated to be, tier 1 capital levels are going to be 8% or better with a lot of the large banks. So I think there's a better margin of safety, and they're more cautious than they probably were, certainly in the last cycle, having been burned. That'll change over time at some point or another, but at this point, I think we're still in pretty good shape there. Industrials, we've had more people take on greater leverage in a lot of instances, so it's maybe been tougher to find names there in some instances than it has been in financials. Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the public markets section starts on page 37 with broad fixed income. That fixed income, as you recall, is exclusively the REIMS external portfolio that is managed for us by them. Returns on page 37. For the year, you can see, similar to what John was just saying, it's fixed income portfolio, negative returns for the first year, or the last year, but relative returns better than the benchmark. This portfolio, it sounds like I'm repeating myself here a little bit, the last several quarters that we've been together. I am, because this portfolio hasn't changed much. These guys have been defensively positioned for several quarters, meaning that strong overweight in treasuries and underweights in mortgage-backed securities and in corporate debt. One thing that they have done is they did reduce their cash somewhat from what it was earlier in the calendar year, but again, pretty darn defensive for this portfolio. They've hovered around the benchmark, being similar to the benchmark as far as duration. They've been slightly longer and slightly shorter, and they continue to be very close to the benchmark as far as duration is concerned. No inflows or outflows in this asset class, and like I said, it's the REIMS asset class, you could even say it is, because they're the only portfolio in there at this time.
Why do we have REIMS instead of internal?
Instead of internal? Well, I think this is, goes back to the pre-Joe days, but I think it was and has been.
Is that 1800?
That's what pretty Jack. The thinking.
That's four, not that.
You did most of them.
What?
You were most of them.
I did one of them, but it was particularly nasty.
Sorry.
We did this, Randy.
You don't get the answer, Randy, we just get to ask.
That's what you're giving me time to think what I'm going to say. The thinking with hiring an asset manager like REIMS externally was that they could be more active and take more risk within that portfolio to shoot for more added returns there. And from there, it would also give us somewhat of a sounding board or a portfolio of somebody who's out there being more aggressive in the way they move the portfolio around, to give us a flavor for what they're thinking in the general fixed income markets that might work for us on a more minimal influence.
So has it worked?
Has it worked? I think that it's as far as getting their input and that, yes, the performance has been up and down. They have made some big bets that have worked, and they've made some that haven't worked so well. So I think the jury's still out on that, but again, this asset class wasn't created just for REIMs. I mean, the asset class was created for broad fixed income external portfolios such as REIMs. We just haven't added to it yet. So in that respect, I don't think it's a, statement either for or against the asset class as much as it's a reflection of the managers themselves. Any other questions on projects? High yield, moving to high yield, see the returns there. And this is the only, and again, I'm repeating myself for the last several quarters, this is the only asset class within fixed income that actually has provided, they provide the best returns within fixed income asset class. And again, this quarter they provided a positive return rather than, or the year they provided a positive return for the last year rather than a negative return as mentioned by John and earlier talking about the REIMs portfolio. So interesting that, even though high yield is the riskier part of the fixed income space, that it has continues to outperform because people are willing to take more risk in fixed income areas like this, and they have a higher coupon. So as long as there isn't this distress about economic prosperity, spreads stay fairly tight for high yield, and you collect the coupon, and you end up doing better in high yield than other fixed income areas. As I mentioned in previous board meetings, last 3 or 4, we're near 20-year lows on high yield spreads. They did expand a bit here, lighten out a bit here since this was written at the end of the quarter, but again, not any huge move, which as people are concerned about the economy in equity land, high yield isn't that concerned about it as the stocks are showing. So interesting difference of opinion there if you look at those two markets. Solid economic growth to date anyway has spurred high yield, and the returns, like I said, are the best in fixed income land. As far as our asset class, we've got 4 managers, as you know, collectively they are defensively positioned, which means they stay in the more quality areas and more defensive areas to invest in high yield. And they've been positioned like that since we hired them, and collectively since we added Oaktree and Shankman in December. So even though the portfolio, the asset class as a whole, underperformed its benchmark recently, again, that doesn't surprise us. We would expect that in this type of environment. And as long as the economy stays well and we don't have a recession or some type of crisis within fixed income quality, that's probably the way it's going to be until we get a turn in the economy, because that's just the way these portfolios are positioned and the way they perform for us collectively in the asset class. No new commitments or money taken out of high yield in the quarter. Any questions on high yield? Okay, now moving on to the more explosive stuff, I guess you could say. But actually, this quarter was very good. The September quarter was very good for domestic equities in particular. You can also see, I think we had 7% returns for the quarter. You can see for the 1 year, mid to upper double-digit returns for domestic equities. So pretty good last 12 months as well. The longer-term numbers look good since we've had this bull market since the GFC. With that said, it's kind of a point here where I feel like I'm talking ancient history because of what's happened here in October and November. Markets have sold off, as you know, and we basically have 4 areas that are concerning the market out there. There's the tariff situation. At the same time that people are concerned about tariffs and slowing growth in Europe and China, the Fed Reserve saying, hey, we're going to keep raising rates because we think we need to do the economy stronger. So you got that contradiction, you might say, from the Fed, where there's concerns about economic growth starting to come to the fore, and at the same time the Fed looks like it's out of touch and continuing to raise rates. So it's really rattled the equity markets recently. And then finally, the fourth point weighing on the markets is the stronger dollar. And the stronger dollar has a tendency to cause emerging market stocks to falter because people start to be concerned about the balance sheets for those emerging market countries and the debt that they have to pay off in dollars. So you got those four areas, or four legs of the stool, I guess you might say, or kind of like four prongs of pitchfork that have pretty much sabotaged the equity markets here in the last 4 weeks or so. Where we go from here, it's always anybody's guess, but the equity markets look pretty cheap now on 2019 earnings. Hopefully there'll be some movement in some of these areas. Chairman Powell's supposed to talk tomorrow, and I think the equity markets would be very happy if he softens his rhetoric a little bit as far as his plans for interest rates for 2019. As far as the performance of our managers as a whole, disappointing in the quarter. As you can see, the pool, the asset classes underperformed by about 100 basis points in the last 12 months, and about 80 of that came in the third quarter by itself. So really kind of got torpedoed there by this quarter. Some of that came from our overweight in small caps. As you know, we like to be overweight small caps. Small caps had a real difficult quarter after performing large caps prior to that during this year. But our actively managed portfolios were disappointment in this quarter. We've got managers that have been positioned in the cyclicals, for instance, rather than some of the bond proxies like the utilities and REITs and such, because they were confident in economic growth, and they also were confident in the valuation that those stocks had, and because of the concerns that came up in the market here, that started to wear on the performance of these type of portfolios. So it's been something, again. RDK provides us data on active managers industry-wide every quarter, and our managers are not experiencing anything, or are not performing any differently, drastically differently than managers industry-wide. It's been a real tough time for active management again, particularly in the last quarter. Any questions on domestic equities? Okay, seeing none. As far as the, I will just make final comments on the positioning, which is pretty much the same, but largely passive in the large caps, overweight, mid and small, and cash, a little less than 1%. No changes there. No money in or out of the asset class, and like I mentioned, Northern Trust was added to diversify some of our company risk within the passive area of external management. International equities, story of two different markets in the quarter in the last 12 months. If you look at international versus domestic, Joe mentioned it earlier in the meeting. International equities have trailed significantly versus the domestics in the last 12 months. Same was in the quarter just completed. We had about a 7% return in the U.S. market for the quarter. We had single digits, like 1% in the overall in the international markets. Small caps and emerging markets actually were the worst performers and provided negative returns for the quarter. Again, a lot of that is coming from the tariff dispute with China. China is a big part of the benchmark. They're a big economy over there, and when the emerging, when the Asian markets get rattled, the emerging markets tend to have difficulty too, particularly when you have a stronger dollar putting pressure on the balance sheet. So again, not a good quarter for international equity as a whole, and the markets there. As far as our managers have done relatively well. As you can see, the returns for the 1 year and 5 year on page 50, and anytime you're getting outperformance there, it's either from our allocation to small caps in this space or to our managers who are outperforming, and part of that came from the managers themselves, and pretty good performance for them. Even looking back at domestics and our domestic managers and our international managers as a whole, I feel like we still have really good managers. It's just a really tough time, particularly in domestics, not so much international. We've been able to add alpha there through our manager stable there. The international equity markets, they've sold off now as well in the U.S., more so than the U.S. in fact. They're looking pretty cheap as well. We were talking 14 times here for the developed markets back in September, 11 times for EM. Those multiples are down to 12.5 and 10 for the emerging markets. So again, the equity markets look cheap now, provided earnings come in to what are forecasted for 2019. But again, that's the big question out there with the trade dispute continuing with China and some of these dislocation possibilities like Brexit and the friction that's going to cause, and then also the Federal Reserve raising rates at a time when markets are more concerned about growth being less than what was forecast, what has been forecasted, is forecast for 2019. No money in or out of international equities, and I think that's about it for my comments. Again, like I said, similar to the domestic asset class, international, we're pretty much the same as far as being largely passive, 1% cash, remaining overweight the small caps. And we have been and continue to be somewhat overweight EM, although it's fairly minor compared to small caps. That's hurt us here during the last several months and this recent sell-off here in the fourth quarter so far. But again, we're outperforming in this asset class, and we've got to be happy with that given the challenges that active management has had domestically, that we're not seeing that as much internationally.
On the 130/30 that you're looking at, how large an allocation are you considering?
Probably to start about 100 million. Yeah, that's a good catch there, Terry. That we are considering that. We're down to the final stages with that manager. We think we have found somebody that will fit in with what we've got already in large caps, but provide different performance, different correlation, and really good outperformance. If you saw their relative performance history, you wouldn't think it's true. So hopefully it's true, because that's one of the things, of course, in our due diligence is we look at the relative performance of our managers, and they've done very, very well against the benchmark the last several years.
How much do we have in the domestic equity in 133?
Let's see, we've got two managers there now. We've got J.P. Morgan and we've got Jacobs Levy, and J.P. Morgan's one of our biggest managers, which is about 8 or 9% of the total. I think we might have an appendix actually, although I'm not supposed to refer to the appendix anymore.
If you look at page 82.
82, okay.
That would be the 8.7% for JP Morgan.
Yep.
And then the 4.6 for the Jacobs would be about 13%.
Right. And of course, that's last quarter. Those numbers would probably be fairly similar even today with the sell-off, just because everything's sold off in the markets.
Remind me, 13% of what's the domestic equity? Is that roughly?
Yeah, it was around 4 billion. It's more like 3.6.
Okay, thank you.
Randy, on domestic, doesn't look like Iridium's done so much good yet. Is that?
No. In fact, if you were to ask me what's my biggest disappointment within the asset class.
Okay, I'll understand.
Okay. It's our mid-cap managers, because as you know, we like to be overweight mid-caps. We, are trying to target that mid-cap sweet spot where mid-caps can do better than large caps over the long term, and also the ground is more fertile there for picking stocks that to beat the benchmark at. And as a whole, our mid-cap managers have really struggled, including Meridian. A lot of bad stock picks by Meridian, and some risk control concerns. I think I mentioned in a few board meetings ago where they didn't really have the kind of handle on where their risks were in the portfolio. We thought they had cleaned that up, but again, a lot of stock picks that just have not worked for them. They're sticking with their philosophy, which, that's one of the main things you always look for when somebody's struggling is, okay, we don't want them to style it. Okay, we don't want them to change the way they pick stocks, because then they change the way they are managing money for us and how they fit in with our managers' activities. So they're still doing the same things, looking for the same type of stocks, but their calls just have not panned out.
Do you see that changes it?
Crystal ball for that one, but I would hope they do. Like I said, our mid-cap managers, if you look at the board book, in fact, from RBK, you can see that the mid-caps, of the red, they're more than any other capitalization size for the managers. And it's not just them, it's been a really tough space to beat the benchmarks. And there were some valid excuses at some time, particularly for the growth managers in mid-cap, where you had some major growth stocks that they wouldn't touch, like Netflix at one time was in the mid-cap index, and our growth managers didn't want to own Netflix because they thought it was so overvalued, it was so expensive. Well, that stock just kept going and going and outperforming and becoming a bigger part of the benchmark, so it made it harder for them, those growth managers, to beat the benchmark. So there's been some dynamics there within the mid-cap space benchmarks that have made it more challenging for our managers, but by and large, I would say it's just been stock picks. Artisan's had some tough times with their stock picks as well.
Thank you.
So as an old stock picker, do you miss that?
Some days I do, and some days I don't. Yes and no. In the third quarter, when the market was up 7%, that would have been fun. Probably wouldn't be so fun this quarter, but yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to it, and it's very challenging, rewarding work when you're doing well, and it can be stressful when you're not. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Randy.
Educating John Romano.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'd refer you to slide 56. I will not reiterate what everybody said about the Fed Reserve, other than to say for STIP, it's very good news to see those increases. We've seen the yield go up about 77 basis points over the past year and expect it to continue to go up. That is good news. Every little bit helps for the state and citizens of Montana. Looking at performance on page 57, we'll see that STIP underperformed just slightly. I am not very concerned about that. There's some short-term factors that weigh into that I expect to to dissipate, and the largest of those is just how the benchmark is calculated, because we changed the benchmark midstream. So the benchmark got to jettison 7 low-yielding months. Didn't get to jettison those, so once we have a full year of this current benchmark, we'll have a much better comparison. And also, we are still reserving for taking a haircut from the earnings to increase the reserve, and that effect is something like 13, 14, 15 basis points, and we expect that to sunset at some point. Other than that, a little change in the characteristics and activities of STIP, other than we saw the assets increase about $269 million over the last 12 months. Biggest part of that was just pension asset reallocation, where we, as Joe mentioned, increased the level of cash in the capital program. STIP reserve is up about $9.2 million to 35.4 million.
John, what is the payout status these days on the SIBs?
So, as you know, we wrote those off,
Right.
but we're still collecting.
Right.
And so the collections on that, running between 100 and 200,000 a month, that will decline as the denominator declines. And then the exact timing of that, kind of anybody's guess, but we do expect to still collect some millions of dollars.
Okay. Oh, good.
If there's no questions, that's all I have to say about STIP.
Okay, state fund, slide 59. Good overall returns, so positive returns here for the year, dragged up by the fact that state fund can have an equity allocation, as well as poor real estate. So both of those positive returns, as mentioned by others here, and that dragged up our return overall from the slightly negative return within the bond portion of the portfolio. Sitting at about $1.5 billion still within state fund. We did reduce our equity allocation by about $10 million there towards the end of the quarter. Wish I had done a little bit more, but at least we did 10. That was kind of with a view towards building a little bit of liquidity there. They did declare a dividend, which you may have seen, and paid that in October, November. So a little bit of planning there for cash withdrawals. We've continued our process of diversifying our core real estate exposure as we have been. Duration similar to the other portfolios, a little bit below benchmark, and still maintaining our overweight to spread product there, with similar to the other portfolios, kind of a bias towards higher quality stuff, but more of an income producing portfolio here. So kind of be a little bit more buy and hold than buying the other portfolios here. Questions on state fund? All right, seeing none. Trust fund, again, slight negative performance here for the year, but dragged up by our allocation to core real estate and high yield, which had positive returns, so that offset some of our negative return from our investment grade bonds. Solid performance here as well over every time frame. No real change here to our allocations within the quarter at any rate. Duration, again, a little bit below benchmark slightly, similar to where we've been for a while, underweight kind of the very long end of the curve. So remember this portfolio, Barclays Ag, so we can go out to 30 years, so we're pretty underweight that long end. And again, overweight corporates, CMBS and ABS, but underweight to treasuries and mortgages. I think that has changed for several quarters now. Questions on trust fund portfolio? All right, thank you.
that gets us through the investment update, but, so we're just done early with the investment stuff planned for today. We potentially could address, one of the topics to free up time on tomorrow's schedule if the board would prefer that, or we could wait until tomorrow.
Why don't we spend a few minutes on the appendices just to get an understanding from the board about whether or not this is helpful and useful. I get a little nervous getting ahead because if we have public comment come in tomorrow on another topic, but we address it today, we haven't provided adequate public notice of the governor's letter, so I'd rather wrap up early than get ahead.
I like the appendix, I just want to say that. It's helpful. Sometimes I don't know I fully understand it, but I do understand it very helpful.
You like the appendix?
I do, yeah.
As long as you promise me that there won't be a problem, I will tell you that I look at them, I find them interesting. But I also think that one of the functions that having the board serves is being sort of the place where the public can go to our materials to find out information. So even though we don't cover every page of everything, to have it available to fulfill our responsibilities of public disclosure, I think we ought to keep them.
I think the issue is whether they print it, not whether they have it.
Well, I know it, yeah, but if they don't print it, then it's not where all the other information always is, which is in the. So I'd like to continue to get them, and
The public doesn't get the packet.
well, it's online.
I know, the appendix will continue to be online, as my understanding. The question is whether or not you want to print it. Am I right about the issue?
Yeah, we would continue to do this, so it's not about doing less work. It's the delivery of it, and Carla's right, as we put this together, this entire packet goes online. We could, if we did not include it here, we could still put it online. But it sounds like, there's some value. We just wanted to be more concerned about, asking you to read 30 additional pages and you not, finding that helpful. So over time, we want to make sure the pages that are put out there address the transparency of the portfolio for the board and the public, but also are a reasonable amount of volume. This is still just a subset of everything.
Well, the solution to that is it's not required reading.
It's true.
But it is very interesting for those of us who are learning.
I like the appendix.
Pictures,
I maybe, I get to the appendix section, I'll look through it pretty quickly, but there's always something that grabs me,
Well, it seems like you never know what piece of information you need until we're in one of these meetings, and then it's right here.
And that's why I was there, so it doesn't sound like there's anyone suggesting to get rid of it, so we'd just keep it.
And I'll be honest, if it's just online and not printed with this, the likelihood of me looking at both is close to zero.
It would be zero for me.
Okay. Printing.
Okay, that's easy.
All right. Follow-up items from today. Neptune and Consumer Direct. Doug, did you get
Yeah,
board
I gave
numbers?
People, but I'll give it to the other people.
Okay. Talked about the appendix. We'll add experience level of senior management to the new managers that we get into. We'll just add that cell. And then maybe spend a moment on response to next year, if you'd like.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see the one we sent last time and then kind of use that as a, you want to do that tomorrow?
Yes.
Look at it.
Okay.
So I think the issue is, do we make a response to Unite Here, and if so, what is it? And so I thought we'd start with what we sent to Organizing Project.
This is so minor, but what we're inserting in the minutes about JLL, could somebody edit that? It's got like 3 run-on sentences. just to make it look good.
Thank you for doing
Well, I
that.
added this article
That's good.
It was a
So
college.
there were only two.
It was a college place.
We used to get Fs for those in college.
Well, C is what you're supposed to get, so.
That's my theory.
I know, I like the F part.
Yeah, that wasn't part of it.
And that was college, not law school, so law school's a little different.
All right, I don't think we need to. Okay, tonight,
6 o'clock at Montana Club.
Is that total time for those of us
I now that it's a public, I mean, it's not a private club anymore, so.
Okay.
Geez, it's been years since I've been there, so I don't.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, second floor, because there's like 6 floors in that building. It's under Dan Villa or Board of Investments name.
anything else?
I won't be at the.
Now,